password on this computer?
Got it.
Okay, great. Thank you for coming, Melinda.
Thank you.
So for those of you who don't know, actually, I'll let you introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit about yourself first.
Okay, hi, I'm Melinda Snodgrass. I'm a screenwriter and a novelist and a recovered lawyer. And I've written a lot of science fiction novels, and I wrote for television, most notably for Star Trek: The Next Generation. And I wrote this script called The Measure of a Man, which explored whether Data was a person, quote unquote, or the property of Starfleet Command. And I was using my legal training. I use my legal training a lot in my writing to come up with a story. I based it off of an infamous Supreme Court decision called Dred Scott.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, no,
Oh, I didn't make that.
yeah,
Oh,
no, this is the
oh
Dred
my
Scott
God.
decision. It's Taney's court. It was uh, Dred Scott was a enslaved man whose master brought him into the free territory. I believe it was Kansas. It's been a while since I've read the
He brought him into Illinois from Mississippi.
from Mississippi, yeah. And as a result, it wasn't Kansas because Kansas was a slave state. But anyway, he brought in, at which point Mr. Scott said, I am now in a free state, therefore I am a free man.
Yeah, and the specifics there was, if I recall, it's not the fact that he moved him in because the fugitive slave law kicked in. It's because his master said, "We are moving here for the next month," and he said, wait, all then calling a cop.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think I'm
exactly.
free
I mean,
now."
it was no, he was no longer in Mississippi, therefore. So the case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that no, he was property, he was not a person. And therefore, he had no rights. And so he was enslaved no matter where he was, because it wasn't situational. It was the fact that he was not a person.
Which set that dangerous
So
precedent for the rest of the country of black people were never meant to be
yeah,
citizens of the country.
yeah,
Yeah.
they were never meant to be citizens. They were not even meant to be seen as human, I mean, if you will. And so when I was thinking about writing a spec script for Star Trek, I looked at Data and I thought, well, why not? Yes, he's an experiment. Starfleet said, hey, let's see if this android, see if he can go through Starfleet Command. Let's put him on a ship. But ultimately, is he really a person, or is he any different than the computer that's built into the ship? And there they are. Yes. So I wrote the script, and I was more interested in the legal precedent because I'm not an AI expert or a computer person. I mean, I would sacrifice small animals to my computer if I thought it would make it happier. I could sort of fumble my way
It might
through.
work.
Might work. And but it's interesting because despite the fact I don't have any training and all this other stuff, I've been invited to speak to AI classes at USC. I was invited to a very private seminar of some of the best AI scientists in the world from Italy and Japan, all over the world, to come to this meeting at this hotel in Northern California. And they had me come to talk to them. First, they watched The Measure of a Man, and then they had me talk to them about the ethical issues of whether we can actually, if we ever do succeed in creating a true AI. And
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like,
Like
what am I doing here?
I think Turing called that a strong AI, right? An AI that could actually like be human in every way, shape, and form.
Yeah, that, I mean, and what does that mean? I mean, because we've got programs that can mimic or ape human behavior. Are they, I mean, I know I hadn't been able to follow up on that article. This guy claiming there already is a feral sapient out in the net right now, that there's an AI that's actually come to life. I haven't seen any more info on it, so I needed to follow up on that. But like I said, I was more interested in the legal, ethical issues surrounding it, because they never really answer it. I mean, I have my lawyer says, the question is, does Data have a soul? I don't know. I don't know if I have a soul. I can't
Well,
answer.
so yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
I mean that's one of the I think. Well, in your episode, you kind of went what was intelligence, self-awareness, and the ability to like learn and understand. That was like the
Right.
three
The three
criteria.
criterions, supposedly.
Um,
But those are pretty basic. I mean,
oh sure.
yeah.
But there's the like, I mean, I guess I'll ask you the question flat out. Does was Data a person, or was he not, in your opinion? Was he actually human in that
No,
regard?
no. I mean, I think ultimately, I think that why have I blanked on his name? The scientist, when he says he's a toaster, I mean, he was built by a man, he was programmed by a man. Because I don't exactly know what makes us human. I mean, is it the ability to appreciate beauty? Is it the ability for me to listen to the opening of Act Two of La Traviata and I cry every time when Violetta says farewell to Alfredo? Um, and is it that this music can move me to the point that I have an emotional reaction? Because Data can't have an emotional reaction. I mean, that
No,
was
it's true.
one of the things that, I mean, when I wrote another episode that got, if anybody's interested in seeing my version of the Instance of Command, it's better than what they filmed. It's on my website. But I had to. Gene Roddenberry wanted me to have Data get laid, and I had to figure
Wait,
out how.
really? All right.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And I had to figure out how to have functionally a computer say, okay, let's go to bed with this girl when he has no emotion about it. I mean, what was the logical argument? So that's in my script. And then there was, the usual freak out because it was Star Trek. But anyway, so yes, because according to Gene, Data was fully functional in every way. and,
Yeah, I need to know that. All right.
well, welcome
Good
to
for you,
my
Data.
world. Yeah. So, yeah, when we're not recording, I'll give you the exact quote. But
Oh, sure.
because I don't know if you're going to show this recording to anybody. So
Oh no, we're gonna show it to a class of grad students.
okay,
But
well, I will not. I will not disabuse them of their ideas about Jane Roddenberry. Anyway, so is he a person? No. My argument was, but he is entitled to the same rights as a sentient being.
yeah. So
That
I think mhm.
he should not be treated as a commodity, that he can be taken taken apart, studied, and maybe they can build more and maybe they can put him back together again and he'll be the same.
Well, that's like
But
a ship of Theseus problem, right? If we like dismantle him, right? Is he still the same Data or not?
is he the same Data? What if there's degradation to his programming, to his memories, to, I mean, yeah, I mean, all of these questions. But is he a person in the sense of how we define it? I'm not sure, because he cannot experience emotion.
Yeah. So yeah, one of the things that like we study, and I talked to you about a little beforehand, is like this theory of like situated cognition that we learn by like doing things. Like if a robot and a kid are playing like ball, the robot would be like, I have to calculate how that catch is coming in, and then I have to grab it. I have to like rely on my coding, and I can adapt my coding. That might be a power I have, but I'm not just like catching the ball. And that's a huge difference between that and like a human being. Another guy did an experiment. Are you familiar with the Chinese room experiment?
I don't know. I don't,
It was
not
a
by that title. Tell me about
Yeah,
it.
so it was a like theory that like if an AI can pass the Turing test, it wouldn't matter because all they're doing is mimicking being human. Like the theory is like you're in a room with a book that says Chinese to English or English to Chinese, and Chinese people send you letters and you write them back in Chinese. So you translate with the codex, write a thing with the codex and send it back. They believe you speak Chinese now, assuming it was a very accurate codex with like a bunch of rules in it. But you actually don't speak Chinese no
Right.
matter what. Like you fooled people in thinking you're Chinese. And so like some William Lycan said like you can make a person like robot, but you can't make a robot that's a person. But he also says like that doesn't matter. If there was a guy walking around who thought they were human and acted like human, that goes into your situation of ethics of do we treat that like a slave or do we not treat it like a slave?
Right. Do we give it the same rights of personal autonomy and choice, which women don't have anymore in this country? But you know,
In a bunch of countries, to be fair.
yeah, to be fair,
To
but
be fair, yeah.
the fact that in in a supposedly,
The land of the free, we get a capital T.
land of the free, home of the brave, and a, high level functioning first world democracy, women have fewer rights than a corpse, is sort of startling. But
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, that was the issue. And I mean, the whole point of the poker game, I mean, and initially it wasn't a poker game. My original script, Data has read every book there is on how to swim. And
Really?
yeah, I was the teaser of him learning to swim. The problem was that, as my boss said, we suck at going on location. We're terrible at it. And Brent's makeup would wash off in the pool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because what I knew from Sternbach and Akuda, who were, technical guys on the show, and I were friends with them before the show, Data weighs like over 400 pounds. He's not, he's not 165 pounds of svelte humanity. He's like over 400 pounds. So he goes to swim. He's read every book there is. He gets in the pool and he sinks like a stone. And then he just walks across the bottom of the pool. He comes out the other end and goes, "Why didn't that work?"
Oh, so he had a disconnect of this should have worked. My
This should have
mind,
worked.
my mind referenced.
My mind has grasped every nuance of how to swim, and yet it didn't work because he hadn't factored in, the fact he weighs 400 pounds, and but we couldn't do that. So my boss said to me, once they hired me on the show, they'd bought the script, they hired me on the show, and he said, "You have to come up with something else where you can study every book." But the idea of bluffing was something he could not grasp. "But you didn't have the cards." "No, I bluffed." But you didn't have the cards,
Yeah, everything that you said was playing a certain way, and you didn't do it.
Yeah,
and that doesn't make sense.
You should have folded because you didn't have the cards, and therefore, it was situational learning, which he could never really truly grasp, because it was it required him to step outside of logic and lie. I mean, in a sense. And that was the whole point of Instance of Command, the other big Data script that I wrote, which is he presents all the logical arguments about why they need to leave this planet, but he can't understand the emotional connection they have to home. And, we're not going to give it up. And he thinks that being a commanding figure, well, if you have the facts, you should, but it's not about that. I mean, when I pitched it to my boss, the idea of it, and forgive the profanity, I said, what Data has to learn is sometimes it's who's the biggest SOB in the group. Who's the guy who can say, "Look, you mother effers, this is what we have to do, and here's why." And he has to figure out how to apply that, even though he doesn't emotionally feel it. And then, of course, I had to get him laid. Anyway.
Oh man, you feel so excited about having to write that script.
I actually like the script, and like I said, my version of it's on the website, and my website, and I'm quite under writings, and I'm quite proud of it. But anyway,
which I'll post in the description if anyone wants to.
Yeah. So anyway, those are all the things that came into the question of it. But do I think he is a human being? Could he write music like Mozart? I mean, certainly he can understand musical theory, probably better than I did, when I was studying it. But is there something ephemeral about art, music, painting, dance, that no matter how technically perfectly you might be at it, does it require that spark of humanity? And I'm a secularist, so I hate using the word soul, but sometimes it's the only evocative word that is kind of there. So, and are our emotions just chemical reactions too?
Yeah. brain can be fooled fairly easily. Like if you look at those optical illusions, like the dots jumping around, like the whiteboard, your brain's
Right.
just making stuff up. Or the colored dress thing that blew everyone's mind is this like red or like blue and black, or
Blue.
like
Yeah.
yellow and white. Everyone's arguing about it. Everyone's like, well, you're clearly lying. Yeah.
Yeah. So, those are I mean, it's people who get, recovered memory, which has been pretty much debunked that because our brains are are easily fooled. They're layers upon layers of things that have evolved that maybe don't connect too well. Our little lizard brain is down there doing its thing, and then there's all this other stuff on top.
Oh, sure. And to a point, like it's a thing that like I don't think an AI would struggle. Like when I first learned how to eat fire, right? I like knew it was safe. I knew how it worked. I knew if I put the fire in my mouth, the CO2 cut out the fire, and I'm like, oh, this is fine. Then I held that torch up and I went, nah, nah, because the lizard brain was saying, what are
No.
you doing? Oh my, that's
Oh
fire.
my
Are you
God.
insane?
Yeah,
And then you
that's
do it again,
fire.
and the brain's like, we've been for thousands of years, we're told not to put fire. What is wrong with you?
Hey, yo, stupid. Don't do that. Yeah, I mean, and then that's it. I mean, I think that the fact that we have evolved over, millions of years and have laid down these cortexes that maybe don't exactly, interact in the best way possible. So,
Sure,
and
yeah,
maybe the
absolutely.
argument is that a computer that you've designed would, except it's been designed by people. So, do we put in the same errors that, do they creep in too because we are prone to mistakes?
Yeah, yeah, and changing the topic a little bit, getting to the world of people. Now we're out of the AI. We're talking about
Okay.
human beings walking around. You mentioned that you before we got on before talking, you mentioned you taught for student taught for a little while, and you mentioned what was it? You student taught a history class, and
Right, American
yeah,
history. Yeah.
and you use like role playing for that.
In a sense,
Mhm.
yeah. I got copies of the script of 1776, the musical, and because we were studying the Constitution, the Revolutionary War. And I didn't want the kids reading through a dull history book. Why don't you outline the chapter? I'm that's not teaching to me. So
Everyone in this education class, we all agree with you. Like
yeah.
this is the right place
So
to say those hot button
yeah.
issues.
So I signed roles. I brought in the music, the album. They didn't do the singing, but they read and played the parts, and then we would, when the singing started, I would use the recording, and they really got grounded in the debates and the arguments that went on over the drafting of the Declaration of Independence. And it was really fun. I mean, yeah.
Well, yeah,
So,
because it's creating. We call it like learning, like learning by doing. They have like the attention and the attention to it and the intention to learn. So they're making. It's not them learning a thing. They are making a memory of the time they were in a situation, which is like storing that, actually like acting it out, which is so useful. Another thing you mentioned is how you taught writing, and I think your theory on writing is actually
oh,
really
shit.
really neat. Yeah, no problem.
No, it's just spam. That's all I get anymore. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Yes, you were saying about writing.
Yeah, yeah. So like your theory on writing and how you teach writing. Like what do you find is the best methods for it? I know you have an opinion about like who can write in retrospect.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody can be taught the rules of grammar and, how to diagram a sentence and those kind of things. But I have this theory and that writing is a lot like music. You either can carry a tune and you have musical ability or you don't, because good writing is like music. It has a rhythm and it flows and and sometimes you'll be reading something and it just feels like it's plodding along. It's correct, but it doesn't sing. And so, there are some people that I can't teach, I mean, I can teach them how to write a proper sentence, but I can't teach them how to make it beautiful or make it evocative or make it, draw an emotional reaction from the reader or the viewer if I'm doing scripts. And I think that's something, and some of this is practice. I mean, um, people say, well, how can I become a better writer? And the usual answer we always give is write a lot. I mean, write hundreds of thousands of words. I mean, over the course of my career, I've probably written 3 or 4 million words by now between the books and the scripts and the other things that I've done. And every time you write, you get better. And the other thing I say is set a goal for yourself. Set, what is it I want to improve in my writing as I'm doing this new project? And I read writers who are better than me and try to figure out why they're better than me. Why is that sentence so beautiful? Why did that move me so deeply when I read this page or this scene? What did they do? And try to analyze it and figure out. And young writers imitate other writers, and that's perfectly okay, because you can't find your voice until you've written for a while. Your
Yeah.
voice is going to sound like a lot of other people initially. But eventually you will find what you do. I mean, Jack Vance, very famous science fiction writer, had the most beautiful, lush prose. I mean, it was just, it was like walking through a flower garden and the scents come up around you. And I can't write like that. That's not my gift. My gift is dialogue. What I can do is write crackling good dialogue. So I try to promote what I do well and try to improve the things I don't do well,
I
but I
mean,
don't try to write like Jack Vance.
I mean, I remember. I think the prettiest thing I've heard was like Terry Pratchett's in when he wrote Snuff. There's that part where they're describing things, and you're like, I didn't know words could make me just like feel all these emotions. And you're putting it down, going, oh my God, I need to put this down right now. It's
Yeah.
beautiful
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, and that's a rare gift. I acknowledge I don't have it, but what I can do is hopefully create good characters that people connect with, and then have them interact with each other in ways that interest a reader and our viewer if it's for television.
Hmm.
Um, and so, what I do is when I'm working with a young student, say, I have them write, they give me the script, we go over it, and then I will change it. I'll say, okay, I'm going to change this dialogue, and here's why. And I'll rewrite it
And that
and have
why is very important, right? Telling them like, here's why I'm changing this information.
this
You're
thing.
you're
Yeah, I
making
mean,
them like learn inside this like making treating them like
right.
an actual writer, like what they would actually be doing.
Right. And the other thing too that I always say, whether you're writing prose or for screen, read it aloud, read it out loud. Because if it's awkward, you will hear it. If the dialogue is clunky, you will hear it. I mean, and so that's and of course we're doing it has to sound like natural dialogue without actually being like natural dialogue, which
Right.
is an interesting, that tightrope that you're walking.
Now, you said that you would also have writers like watch you write and then have them ask questions. What's that process
Yeah,
kind of like?
if they're sitting with me, a young writer, and I'm working on the script, if they want to know, why I started the scene where I started it, or why I, changed the dialogue. The other thing I tell writers on screenplays in particular is if your dialogue is over 4 sentences long, it better be, the St. Crispin's Day speech or the Gettysburg Address. Quick, sharp dialogue. If you start writing and you've got a half page of somebody monologuing, it's never going to go well. It's not going to break it up somehow. Um, so that's just, it's just these tricks that keep people engaged and interested, as the reader, as the viewer. So
Now, what is writing like on like a at Star Trek? I imagine they weren't like it's just you. You can write whatever you want. You had like a writer's
a
like a
writer's
writer's
room.
room. Okay,
TV shows have writers' rooms. They can be 4 people or 8 people, depending on wild cards. For Hulu, we had 8 people in the writers' room, which was a big staff. And then the show I did, Reasonable Doubts, we only had 4 of us. Basically, the writers get together in the room and you plot out, well, now, especially with streamers, it's changed because you're going to plot the entire arc of the show, all 8 episodes, all 10 episodes, whatever it's going to be, 6, 10, 8.
Sure.
And you plot out the arc of the season, where the season's going to end. You should always know where your season ends. And then we would do what's called breaking a story in Hollywood. We would start to outline and lay out every scene in a script. So now on a big show, like where you're doing 22 on the air, like a Star Trek or CSI or one of those sort of more networky shows, you're always trying to come up with some idea because you have to do 22 of these suckers, and you generally don't know where the end of your season is. But that's changing because of the streaming. So you start to figure out, and the staff works together to plot these scripts in detail. Act 1, scene 1, teaser, act 2, act 3, however many. Even if you're on a streamer where there aren't commercial breaks, you still kind of think in terms of acts a little bit, so you know where your high and low points are. The other thing we do is we plot backwards. We never start at the opening when we're plotting a script. We figure out what the last scene, the last big climactic scene of that episode is. We put that down, and then I usually then go and figure out what the teaser is that makes people want to watch it, and then you plot backwards from the end. You start to figure out, how do I get from here to here, but I'm going at it not from the start to the finish, but from the finish to the start. Because if you know where you're ending, it's very easy to know what you have to get there.
Now, how is that? How is it like working with other people? Like in the educational term, we have a thing called community of practice, which is like you work inside of a community and you all are trying to get to one goal, and that's how the learning really functions. Ha, what's it like working with them? And do you think it makes you a better writer to work with people, or is it better to kind of like do your own thing away from this kind of group?
It depends on the staff. I mean, if you
Okay.
have a good staff, if you've got bright, talented people, you butt heads, you argue, 3 people make suggestions. I mean, we had this tradition in Star Trek that George and I still use for wild cards called the dumb stick. And
The
when you are
what
holding
stick?
the dumb stick,
Okay.
when you are holding the dumb stick, you are permitted to say any really stupid idea you might have. Just throw it out there, and nobody gets to mock you. Nobody gets to say, wow, that's really stupid. You say it, you say, okay, I've got this really stupid idea. What if blah, blah happens to this character? And oftentimes we would go, oh my God, yeah, whoa, wait a minute though. But if we twist it just a little bit, that could work, because you never know. You don't want people to self censor themselves. You want them
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
throw it out there. And so the dumb stick sort of gave everybody permission to, just throw out some idea that just seemed crazy off the wall. And I find it very useful. When I teach how to break a story in Hollywood, I always bring the drumstick and we pass the dumb stick, we pass it around. I say, okay, people go, give me that dumb stick, and then George and I do it when we're plotting out wild cards books, the sort of arc of a wild
And
card.
just so people know, that's George R. R. Martin, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
Mr. Game
yeah,
of
yeah.
Thrones.
Mr. Game of Thrones.
So I guess I ought to call him Mr. House of the Dragon now. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, part of it is a good staff makes you better, and you all come up with how to make this script the best it can be, interesting. Everybody has input, especially if you have a very diverse writer's room, which is really useful. Diversity really helps because people have different, outlooks on life and life experiences that they're bringing to it. And then once it's plotted, you assign that script to a particular writer. Okay, you go write that script. You have 2 weeks. We'll see you when you're done. And you can write anywhere. I mean, I had one writer on Profiler. He was from East Coast and he really hated California. And he would fly back to Boston and write there for 2 weeks and then fly back to LA with his script completed. And it was, great. Wherever you're happiest writing, go right there. and then everybody reads it. And then the boss, the showrunner, gives notes, and you rewrite it. And often the showrunner will then rewrite the script again, because they created the show and they know the characters, and so they do their thing. So it is very, very collaborative. But you generally, and sometimes you write with someone. I mean, I've been on shows where if there's a young beginning writer, I'll be asked to write with them as a team. Again, so that they can sort of learn. And I'm a little bit of an inner tube, like in the pool, here, I'm here for you, and we're going to do this together. And,
Like kind of like an old school apprenticeship kind of thing. Like,
in a way, yeah. So that's, the show I'm developing right now, one of my writers, I mean, he's enormously talented, but he had asked me if we could write a script together. The script he did alone was terrific, but the one we wrote together, it was really fun. It was with a good partner, it can be a blast. And then you're a writing team, and that's a whole different. And here's this Hollywood insider thing. So if you're looking at the screen and it says, Michael ampersand Melinda, that means that we're a team. We are a team. We're paid as a team. We split the money. We write together. Now, if it's Michael A&D and Melinda, that means I was hired to come in and rewrite you, and we aren't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if you see a movie that has a whole lot of names with A and D between them, you can be pretty sure that script is going to suck. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it means that they went through a bunch of different writers, oh, wait, let's get the funny guy to punch up the jokes. Oh, wait, now we've lost the emotional content. What do we hire the emotional content person to? Yeah.
So that's why there's like tone differences, and you're like, what is this character doing? He was acting like this in the last scene. Maybe that person misread the intention. Okay, yeah, gotcha.
Because it's writer following on writer instead of a team of writers working in a collaborative team. So ampersand, collaboration, A&D, somebody got hired to rewrite you.
No, so. Hey, that's awesome. I'm not gonna be able to unsee that. Thanks, Melinda.
Yeah,
I'm gonna see Ed and be like, "Oh, this movie's gonna suck," and people are gonna be like,
"No, I really, I'll go into the movie theater and they'll start to run the credits, and I'll see all the, and I'll go, oh my god, oh no, this is gonna be so bad."
Oh my god. Yeah, and I guess I had like only a couple more questions. The last couple of things were you said you brought a lot of your other experiences into your writing of Star Trek, at being a lawyer and a historian. Is that how a lot of what you kind of bring to it? Like, you have your other experiences and you use the experience to influence something else?
Yes. I always tell when I'm teaching, when I'm brought in to talk to a class, high school, college, whatever, the one thing I always say is, no education is wasted. Finish school, stay in school, finish it. It doesn't matter what you're studying, you're going to use it. And the advantage to being a writer is you get to be a perpetual student, because you're constantly learning, about explosives or, neurocognition, or I mean, you're writing and you're going to start digging into something in order to make it deeper and give it more meaning. So I always tell people, and hobbies, I mean, do things. Writing, you can only write about 5 hours a day, maybe 5.5. After that, your brain turns to oatmeal. Okay. So go out and do something physical, or, have different things you do, play the trombone, train cats to, push, do something. I mean, have as many wide experiences as you can. Just sitting at your desk writing, it's harder. And the other thing too is listen. I mean, COVID made it harder, but I used to love to go to cafes and sit there with my laptop and a cup of coffee and eavesdrop on people, because you never know, you're going to hear some bizarre conversation. You're going to, oh yeah, I'm going to put that in a script. So, or in a book.
Marge, wasn't that our conversation at the coffee shop? That sounds a lot like the conversation. Wow. This characters
So,
really resemble us.
writers are magpies. I mean, we're collecting everything from everywhere. If it's shiny and cool, we're going to collect it, and then we're going to use it somewhere else.
Oh, sure.
So,
I mean, I remember I was running a live action role playing game, and in it I had to like I made like C4 for them to bomb defuse. I'm looking up how to build C4, how to look this. I'm like, pretty sure I'm on a watch list somewhere because I'm like looking up all this stuff, and I'm like, oh, it's not great.
the good news is that the NSA apparently, and all those, alphabet soup surveillance things, they have a list of writers
Really? Okay.
because otherwise they'd waste all their time, saying, why is this person investigating, poisons or C4? Oh, it's one of them. It's one of those writer
One of
types.
those crazy people
One
walking
of those
around.
crazy people. Yeah, they actually do supposedly have a list of, that they check us out and they go, oh, okay, it's them. They're not
Oh,
actually.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And the last questions are actually from my professor, who was curious about a couple things. His
Okay.
first question is, what was it like to work on Star Trek: The Next Generation? His exact words were, "How cool is it to work on Star Trek: The Next Generation?" That sounds like framing of the question, but I'll give you both.
To hear actors speak your dialogue on a soundstage for the first time is the biggest high I've ever had in my life. On the other hand, Star Trek is the show that put the S and the T in PTSD. So, um, it was a difficult show. I mean, and then I went on to work on other shows that were, where it was more rewarding. But Trek was Trek. I mean, it has that history, and it has this fan base that's. I mean, that was one of the things where it's like, we make up all this techno babble. Please don't ask us what it really means or why it works, because it doesn't, because it's techno babble. you know. But
That
no,
wasn't real? What? Oh my
I
God.
know
Oh my
it's
God.
like, yeah,
Next
the
you're gonna
best Star
tell
Trek,
me
the best Star Trek movie ever made was Galaxy Quest. So
next you're gonna tell me his lightsabers are fake too.
I know it's heartbreaking, but no, I mean,
They're not. They're real.
I'm eternally grateful it launched my Hollywood career, and I grew up as a little kid on original Trek, so it was sort of like this amazing experience to get to do that. So
And then his final question, we already answered the second one. How did the team formulate your meta narrative theme when you wrote Measure of a Man, or like any episode for that matter? How did you pitch that, or did they come to you being like, we want Dred Scott decision, the Star Trek
no,
episode?
that that script, there was no writer's room, there was no staff. That script was all me. I wrote it as a spec. Um, so in the old days, when you broke into television, you would write what was called a spec script for a show that was already on the air. 30 something, you wanted to pick a good show. You didn't want to pick like The Love Boat, and write a spec script for The Love Boat. So when George Martin called me, George had already gone out to Hollywood. So here's the story. George has gone out to Hollywood. He worked on New Twilight Zone. He was working on Beauty and the Beast. And he called me and he said, hey, Snod, I think you'd be good at the screenwriting thing. If you write a spec script, I will show it to my agent. And so I looked around. I didn't want to write for Beauty and the Beast because I thought it put an undue lot pressure on my friend, George. What if I wrote a really terrible script? And I didn't want to try LA Law because it looked like it was too closely plotted. And I had grown up as a kid loving Trek. So I thought, okay, I started watching the show. I got the idea for Measure of a Man. And this is the single best piece of writing advice I ever got, and it came from George. George had told me that you never, ever, 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 ever sell your spec script. Your spec script is just a calling card. All it does is present your writing techniques to a potential boss. And the other interesting thing is they rarely sent scripts to the show you wrote it for because you will never capture the characters as well as the people. So like if I had written a 30 something script, they would have sent it to some different show, not to 30 something. But anyway, I wrote this Star Trek script and Georgia told me you never ever sell your spec script. And I called him back and I said, George, I've got this idea and I think it's really, really good. And he had said what the spec does is it gets your foot in the door, and then you have other things you pitch. They call you in to pitch for other episode ideas. And I said, maybe I should write a different script and save this one for the pitch. And George said to me, never hoard your silver bullet, meaning lead with the best thing you can possibly write, the thing you're most passionate about, the thing you believe in the most, write that. So I wrote The Measure of a Man. And the only two major changes, both of which I made, I had to change out the swimming for the poker game. And the other thing is, when I wrote the script, Guinan wasn't in the script. I didn't have a scene for her. And at that point, they had bought the script. The script had been sent in by George's agent. They bought it. And then when they met me, they hired me to work on the show. And then my boss, Maury, called me in and he said, we were looking over Whoopi Goldberg's contract, and she's contracted to be in 16 or whatever episodes. And if we don't put her in Measure of a Man, we won't meet our contractual obligations. So you have to put Whoopi in this script. And he said, and you have 3 hours. So go. Because we were in prep. I mean, we were prepping to shoot this thing. And suddenly there was going to be a new scene. And so I went and paced my office. I wore a hole in the carpet practically, walking in circles to try to figure out what I could do. And the result was the Picard Guinan 10 forward scene that I wrote in that afternoon. That was, but though that script was all mine. There was no input. There were Maury saying we can't go on location and he can't swim, but I wrote that script. So yeah, that was, and then later, then I learned how to be in a writer's room because I got hired, and Ira Bear, who was brilliant, and my mentor, I learned a lot from Ira about how to be in the staff. And now I get to run staffs, and I love it. I love being in charge of a writer's room. I think it's just so much fun to work with other writers and help them craft something and then go write something wonderful.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Melinda.
You're welcome.
Thank you for this AI teaching Hollywood Insider, Star Trek. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.